Hi everybody, this is Michael Hollands for Sound of the Movies. Today I have the pleasure to speak to Brian Tyler. Over the past 20 years, Brian has written the music for well over 100 projects. He has not only written music for such high-profile films such as Aliens vs. Predator: The Requiem, John Rambo, Timeline, Iron Man 3, Constantine, The Expendables, Now You See Me, the 5 out of 8 of the Fast and the Furious franchise, and The Mummy, but he also tackles video games such as Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 and Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. And he also scores big for television, having written music for Star Trek, Hawaii Five-0, Children of the Dune, and Sleepy Hollow. By covering all of those mediums, he has shown the industry that he certainly has not only become one of the most versatile, but also one of the most sought after and best composers in the business. Welcome, Brian.
Oh, thank you. Good to be here.
It's a privilege to talk to you today, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Sure, absolutely.
First, Brian, I would like to know more about your musical education and how you first started out in this business.
Yeah, it kind of, it's interesting. Starting in the business started before I was in the business in a way because I was always interested in film music, and I always, you know, wrote music that sounded, it kind of, even early on when I started writing music, it kind of had a vibe that sounded perhaps cinematic. I was really interested in films in general, and making films and making short films and kind of just doing things at home, like that would be little, video projects and things. So I basically from an early age, one, I loved movies, and two, I loved movie scores. And so when I began writing music, it was really something that was natural. Kind of, was a huge fan of all the great composers, and so really I was primed in a way to write music in the style of film scores. And this is from childhood, and so in a way I would read a book or I would watch a, and I'd write some music that would kind of have something to do with scoring in a way what I was reading, and I'd sit down at the piano and I'd write music, and then I became, while that was happening, I also in my teen years I started playing music professionally, and I was a studio drummer, and I did touring, and I was a pianist, and I wrote music, and I did some touring as well. Just kind of, it was one of those things. I started pretty young, but I wasn't doing films, of course. But it certainly was a natural progression. By the time a couple opportunities came along where people had heard my music, a director heard something I written that was kind of a small requiem that he wanted to use in his film. So I said, why don't you let me write the whole score, and it led from there. So my education was really, in a sense, just learning as I went. Of course, as during those times, I did study theory and study, piano and drums and percussion, and played in orchestras in various capacities. But it was I probably learned just as much from playing in bands and just kind of picking up different instruments on my own and just watching film and loving it, and just being a huge film score fan than anything. I think that was probably my greatest education, honestly.
And you play lots of instruments, right?
I do. I guess it's one of those things, like it started. I didn't have a lot of early on. I didn't have a lot of friends that played instruments in any serious way, and I wanted to create you know, pieces of music that were bigger than just a piano piece or, just drums. So I learned to very crudely kind of multi-track, and so I would play many, many instruments, and now that's led to, it's kind of kept going that way on my scores now. I'm playing dozens of instruments on any particular score, along with conducting the orchestra. So it all kind of gets mushed together, and it's become my palette. It's really, part of my sound. I of course work with samples and computers and all that, but I'm a big fan of setting up microphones and recording in my studio that as well. And I'm a big proponent of live music, whether or not it's mine or my hands on the instruments, or it's an orchestra playing, or it's individual solos that I bring in from other people. It's just really helped me to kind of play a lot of instruments, and certainly even world instruments. Like I remember when I was doing Partition, which is a movie that takes place in India in the 1940s.
Yeah.
I picked up a lot of, I tried my hand at learning those instruments, and actually it's if you put your mind to it, you can pick up an instrument and be able to play them and utilize that live, rough around the edges kind of sound that I love about live instruments over samples.
Usually these days, as I understand it, composers create a mock-up because the producer and director wants to hear a fully electronic, let's say, version of what it's going to sound of the entire piece. They want to know what it will sound like before it gets recorded with the orchestra. Do you usually mock things up, or do you prefer actually sitting at the piano, play a couple of key pieces to a producer?
I prefer not mocking it up, only because if that, if it can be done that way, then great, and there are situations where there's a lot of trust, and it's not the common way that it's done, especially on big budget films. You kind of need to demonstrate to producers and movie execs and everyone, they're putting hundreds of millions of dollars into a film. They kind of need to know what it's going to sound like from their perspective. They don't, they hired me to do it, so they realize that I've delivered before on many, many movies, but nonetheless, it's kind of, you start over on every movie. Now, in the situations where I've worked with, Bill Paxton and and certain people that I was very just close with, and Greg Utanis and different directors, over time I've been able to just sit down at the piano and say, here you go, because they want it that way. George Gallo is another one. And but in general, yeah, I'll mock it up, and mocking up is something that I'm very used to, and making it sound as good as possible. But often when I'm mocking up an orchestra, I'm playing a lot of live instruments in as I go, because I have access myself to being able to sit down and play the cello or the piano or the timpani, and I have all those things live. Pretty much the whole percussion section is in my studio. I have vibraphones and marimbas, and I have a harp, and I have all. So it kind of is a half mock-up, half live, even when I'm just kind of demonstrating something. I definitely always play the drums live, always, all that stuff. I won't just give them synth things because I don't like the way they sound. And unless it's like a synth score, that's intended to be, vintage synths, and it's supposed to be that sound like a Vangelis kind of thing, then great. I'll do that on purpose. But if I'm trying to simulate something, I'll try to do as much live, even in the mock-up, as possible.
Okay. But speaking of the musical process and also the musical education, do you actually think it is vital to have a proper music education or even classical training in order to totally be up to the task because of the ever-changing industry?
Well, I mean, if what you want to do is classical styled symphonic scores, I would say, yeah, it's a very good idea, huh? um, but there's so many different kinds of scores. So if you're going to do something that's more along the lines of, um, something that's kind of an electronic type of vibe, or a rock thing, or a jazz, there's so many different genres of music that there's as many genres of music in scoring as there are in non-scoring. So it 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 totally depends. Education and educating yourself and familiarizing yourself, be it formally or informally, is important. I mean, it is vital to me. Um, Whether or not it's formal or not, the only really thing would be, I would say, having a formal education is better than not. If you're trying to work with an orchestra, you can at least speak the language and know so much about what's going on in the inner workings of what's there. It's good to know what they can do and to be able to communicate what's in your mind to them. Without it, it's a bit harder. It's not impossible, and you can self-educate as well. It doesn't even necessarily be formal, but you need to really know the language of the orchestra if you're working with orchestra. It's only one kind of scoring. Um, I have to communicate with the orchestra all the time because I conduct the orchestra, and I don't just write for it. So for me, it's important to know, um, what that line of communication is, and be able to describe what's in your mind to them in a common language, and that is education, of which I've had both formal education, and also a lot of it is I continue to study to this day on my own. I just always want to learn. I'm like a sponge, and the more I learn, the more I can use those means to develop my own voice more, because there's a lot in there in my brain kicking around musically, and without the ability to describe it and speak the language of music, it can just sit in your brain and never get out, and that's why I think it's good as almost like a Rosetta Stone language that between musicians.
Absolutely. Brian, of all the scores you've worked on in the past 15 to 20 years, which one do you consider your best effort so far?
Mm, that is a great question. Um, when I kind of every once in a while, for various reasons, especially when I was going through and putting together concert programs of my music, I occasionally go back and listen to scores from my past and kind of go through everything and listen, and there's a certain point when enough time has passed where I don't intimately there's kind of a removal process where I kind of step outside myself and I can hear the music as not totally, but closer to what it's like to listen to it as a person that didn't write it, in a way, as a person from the outside, the further away I get from it time-wise. And some of my favorite moments are when I hear something and I think, wow, I really like this. And I kind of don't remember how. I'm like, I went to that chord. What's that harmony? What the heck is going? And it's a nice, happy, warm feeling inside that I like my own music, and that it can move me in a way. And sometimes it's also associated with kind of a nostalgic feeling also of what was going on in my life and the emotions of the time. To pick one is crazy. I don't even know how many, 90. Like I don't. So it would be impossible to say what my favorites are. But like it's funny, going through and when I was arranging the concert, I really wanted to use some Thor and Children of Dune and Partition, and there's Iron Man 3 in it, and then there's moments like the song Drift and Fall Again from Criminal, and then
Criminal, yeah.
And that song really hit me, so we included the song, and I kind of thought, oh, I think, and then there's really small scores like Columbus Circle and ones that people don't know as much, or the theme from Far Cry, which is a game, and it's almost like the ones that often are kind of aren't as obvious. But I loved working on all the Fast and Furious movies. There's some moments in there that really a lot of the emotional cues from those movies, I think, people don't even realize necessarily are there if you look at the title of the movie. But in The Mummy, which was recent, and Power Rangers, and the ones that I've done in the last year, they're in my immediate memory, and so Mummy is one of my favorites, certainly, and then I go all the way back to Timeline and early days, and I listen to that, and Eagle Eye is another one.
Yeah.
Anyway, I could kind of go on, but when I'm saying there is no favorite, it's just I have those moments where I'll look back at something and go, yeah, I'm glad I wrote that way.
Yeah,
because
sure.
It's part of my history now, as a human being.
Yeah, but also one of your scores, which sometimes is overlooked, is on The Greatest Game Ever Played.
Oh, right. Absolutely one of my favorites. It is really. It's funny. I was just playing that, and I sat down at the piano the other day, and I was playing it. And that was a score with one of my favorite people, Bill Paxton, who sadly passed away.
Yeah.
As a director, but he always, when I did Frailty and Greatest Game Ever Played, he just wanted me to sit down at the piano and play it for him, and I do remember very well, and it haunts me too, and it's a special place in my heart. It was when the exact memory of me sitting down and playing the theme from Greatest Game Ever Played, which was a whole suite. It was not just the theme, but it was all the themes. Broken Dreams, which is one of my favorite themes I've written. All the kind of more Irish music in it, and then the main theme, and I played this long thing on the piano, this big suite for him as he just sat there right next to, me on the piano bench. And that was it. He just was, I remember him kind of overcome the emotion after I played it, and he said, "You nailed it." And kind of, you could see it really affected him, and it's maybe my favorite memory in all of scoring that I've ever kind of experienced, was that one little moment with Bill, playing those themes for him, and so I'm glad you mentioned that one.
Absolutely. I mean, Bill Paxton is gonna be missed. I mean, I remember him well. I remember, when I was a teenager, I watched him in True Lies and all those movies. Aliens, absolutely. And so I think True Lies is one of the most interesting and one of the greatest parts that Bill Paxton ever played. I think it's not only
so good.
It's hilarious. It's not only really funny, but it's really good acting.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good when his car salesman, fake CIA agent, secret agent thing is just hilarious, and the way he pulls it off, it so made the movie. It was one of the true highlights of that movie. And I love that movie too.
Yeah, it's so hysterical. One of my favorite scenes of True Lies, while we are at it, is when Schwarzenegger when he's trying to sell the car to Arnold Schwarzenegger and they make it back, and of course he's talking about Jamie Lee Curtis, Arnold's wife, and he has no idea that they are married. It's hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he does the it's the fantasy of Arnold to like punch him and while they're driving in the
Yeah,
convertible,
he knocks him right out, you know.
and then it turns out didn't even happen. Yeah, it's really great. What a guy. I mean, he was just in a movie that didn't do well at all, but he was great in it, which was this, I think it's called The Circle.
Yeah.
And he plays the father who is almost unrecognizable in it, and but he has I believe it's some kind of degenerative disease in the movie where he's now I forget what it was, but he's terrific in it, and it's kind of hard. I saw it recently, and it's hard watching it just because.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, also his directorial efforts like Frailty. I definitely need to revisit Frailty, the movie. Of course I got the DVD, and I definitely need to watch it again.
It's so good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, but what you mentioned earlier on about picking a favorite is so hard, and I tend to agree. Picking a favorite movie or favorite director or composer, it's always difficult, and of course when you're talking about music, it doesn't really make it any easier to pick a favorite album. But I think my favorite Brian Tyler score would be Now You See Me, the first part.
Oh gosh, I should have mentioned that. That is definitely one of my. Yeah, there are times where I do. When I've been asked before, I have mentioned that as my favorite score that I've done for sure. Yeah, that really. There are, yes. When I listen to that, I think the combination of kind of the jazzy and fun big bandy elements with then that goes into kind of mystery, but then there's these emotional cues that I think are some of my favorites that I've worked on, and it's hard for me to listen to my own music just because I know it's kind of a strange thing, but that is one that I can actually just kind of pop in and I really enjoy. But I think in the way it worked with the movie, that was really fun, and I worked with a lot of great people on that movie, the director Louis and everyone, and I loved doing the sequel too. That was another John Chu but Alex Kurtzman, who I worked with so many times. They were really behind me on that film, doing something that was completely different than what I've done before, and that was appreciated by me.
But I think as an artist or as a composer, you always look at your own music differently, and if you look at it from a fan's point of view or from a journalist's point of view, it's always a different aspect. And there are, of course, composers out there that don't like a certain effort they made, but fans would praise that certain effort as one of the best they ever did, and so it's always difficult. But speaking of Now You See Me, are there any plans yet for another sequel?
Yeah, all I do know that there's. I mean, I remember talking to. Different people on the film about it, and I know we'd like to, and I don't see why not. I mean, I in fact, after a point, I kind of just was reading about it, like anybody else. I would see it in, magazine that they're working on the third script, and I believe they're still working on that. I'm actually working right now with John Chu on something else.
Great.
The director. And then, of course, I just worked with Alex Kurtzman
on The Mummy.
So, it's all in the family,
Great.
So
great.
If it's going, I mean, I really hope so.
That's hopefully. I mean, I really enjoyed the movies, and when I watched the second part, I mean, it struck me as pretty obvious, that there was going to be another part, because the ending just implies that there's more to come.
Oh yeah, and it's really cool too. I mean, that's the thing is that I would love people to know what that what I know what you don't know.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's a great series and it's really fun
It's
to make. And I
total
think,
fun, yeah.
yeah, and also I'm just I'm a huge kind of another thing I did when all my life was kind of sleight of hand, card magic, and all that was something a part of my arsenal. It was everything from doing. I used to do little magic shows, and kind of I would earn money along when I was trying to scrape by with anything. It was like movie and magic. So it was one of those interesting things where two things that I love to do came together.
Right. But I think in general it's one of your landmark scores, one of your best achievements. I mean, not only the main theme, but the whole, let's say, thematic application when it's put up against the movie and how it is edited and written. I think it's really, yeah, one of your top
Yeah.
5 best scores so far. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll go with that. I'll
Good.
agree.
Another landmark score and one of the most important ones, which I consider your most important one, is Iron Man 3.
Yeah, for sure.
What are your recollections of that movie and working with director Shane Black?
Shane's great. There's he really knows his music, and the cool thing about that one, I distinctly remember, was just uh, how much Shane and as well as Kevin Feige, how truly into film music that those guys are, and how everyone from Victoria Alonso to they just like the whole Marvel crew was really just enthusiastic about doing something very thematic for Iron Man, and it kind of, he was in a different place as a character than, for instance, he evolved since the first movie. And so it was kind of time for him to get a superhero theme, except that it needed to be brash and grounded in the fact that he's Tony Stark.
Yeah.
So, that theme needed to work in various ways. There were times where it was actually, a big kind of anthemic superhero vibe, but it had a lot of propulsion. And there were times where it was very lonely on the piano when he's kind of outcast and he's not really Iron Man anymore for a little bit there. And then, why not end it with a kind of a rousing, like, 1960s big band kind of, rockabilly thing at the end.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've written a theme that's been used in a single movie in such diverse ways, and that was really the fun of it, to turn the superhero formula on its head, but at the same time have classic elements, that it wasn't just something that, said, hey, we're just going to break convention. It wasn't about that. It was about trying to make something memorable.
Yeah, I mean, the theme was great, and it really fits into the whole Iron Man, Tony Stark, let's say, mentality. And
Right.
But the action elements were also of your music were also very great. For instance, the cue when they destroy his mansion, and
Sure.
it's really what I consider one of your biggest and best action cues.
That one was crazy.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, bro. I mean, the whole score just works so well. I mean, there were also subtle moments on the album, but of course also your signature, let's say, style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. The it was definitely one that I loved working on, and just as a fan, I mean, I was just a fan of Iron Man Downey Jr.
Yeah.
Was awesome, but I was a fan of the Iron Man comics when I was a kid, so it goes way back for me.
But I think, but let's talk about your musical style. I mean, I have mentioned your signature, let's say, style. We just talked about Iron Man, but I also heard people that compared you or your, let's say, action writing to
Oh,
Jerry
the action style.
to Jerry Goldsmith.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, but to me personally, I think there is not a bigger compliment anybody, any musician, any composer could get than being compared to Jerry Goldsmith.
Sure.
And I bet he is one of your major influences when it comes to scoring. That's
You're right. Yeah. There is no question. Jerry. He's one of the handful that if there was no Jerry, I probably wouldn't be scoring. It was Jerry, John, Bernard. And I loved the way he would handle one, orchestration, and two, writing outside of the box harmonically. He didn't adhere to strict classical rules, and there's a certain sound that developed, and of course I'm influenced by that sound, and stylistically, being someone that I just listen to so much, there is an influence in the way I approach the music, and certainly the fact that there's this uncanny connection between us where I seem to have been bestowed the honor of kind of walking in his shoes many times,
yes.
And there's so many. I can't. It's. I mean, the thing is the obvious one is of course Timeline, because I took over that film for him. But even outside of that, we were talking about working on Star Trek, where, of course he scored the first film, and then I ended up writing Star Trek. He wrote the first Alien, then I ended up writing Aliens versus Predator Requiem, and then he did all the First Blood series, and I ended up scoring Rambo. He did the original Universal Studios logo. I ended up doing the 100-year anniversary Universal Studios logo.
Yeah.
It's like, and then he did the first Mummy, the modern Mummy, and then I did the second Mummy. So it's like, it is a parody that keeps on happening, and it couldn't make me happier because he's my idol. So especially I love, in every film I've done in every project I've done where he had originally scored the initial project, I've always made some kind of musical tribute to him within those movies. But even if you listen to my action music as a whole, if you listen to Eagle Eye, Clutch Then Shift, or one of those pieces, or Thor, Avengers, all those, that you can hear the influence that he had on me in a way that's kind of, it's not so much like even the melodies, it's more of the approach and the way that he used orchestra is just kind of ingrained in what the reason my ear was drawn to Jerry is the same reason I like to compose my own music a certain way. I have this straight, if I'd never heard Jerry Goldsmith, I would be, my life would be deprived of a major joy, but at the same time, my tendencies of what my ear likes naturally gravitate towards that kind of sound. So I would have been looking for music like Jerry Goldsmith if there was no Jerry Goldsmith, and I might have even written in a way that was towards that, but I think certainly his influence was such a positive effect on me, and I'm glad that I was able to continue on with some of the projects that he started.
How did it make you feel working on John Rambo. I mean, those movies. Well, I love the Rambo series. I mean, the first two parts are really great. The third part is a little weaker in terms of the storytelling of the movie, but the music of Jerry is always all over the place,
Always
basically.
delivered, yeah, yeah. Always
And
delivered.
but
Sure.
well, the third part had a temp problem that they basically temped in a lot of music from the second part.
No.
But yeah, but the whole series musically.
Well, it kind of happened like also with, you're talking about sometimes there's such an iconic score and then they end up temping it. I mean, it happened with Rocky 1 and Rocky 2 and Rocky 3. There's some Rocky 2 and a Rocky 1. And, so also another Sly series because his music tends to have iconic music. His movies tend to have iconic music.
Yeah. How did you approach, or how did Stallone communicate what he wanted for John Rambo to you?
Once we had our initial conversations about Rambo, I mean, the first thing he asked straight up was, and I didn't know the answer that he wanted to hear at all. He says, do you think that we should use any of Jerry's themes from the other films in this Rambo? And without hesitation, absolutely. And I even said something to the effect, even if, because I didn't know I was scoring the film yet. He hadn't asked me. I was just meeting with Sly. And I said, regardless of who's scoring this, I urge you to utilize those themes, and also combine it with an evolution of it, because he's an older man now that's looking back in a different way through a more emotional lens. So we need the theme that ended up being da 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 da, that one that I wrote, and it needed to go hand in hand. It needed to be something that didn't feel separate, where you could listen to the original theme that plays from the First Blood, and it sounds like the bridge. The new theme is the bridge of that piece now, and now, and so there is no, here we hand off. This is a totally separate composer, can't you tell? I wanted it to. I was saying this in the sense of like, I was so kind of passionate about the original scores that I was trying to give him advice in case it wasn't me scoring those films. I was like, I just wanted that to make sure that the legend, the spirit of Jerry lived on in these movies. It was just important to me personally as a fan, and anyway, so I was glad that he chose me to score the film, and I was able to go in and do that. But certainly, the score is so intertwined with my music and Jerry's. There are many bars and measures of the written score that are intertwined. Certainly one of my proudest moments, being able to, in a way, I felt like I was working with him, looking at his handwritten notes while I was scoring that, and going through the archives, and kind of, it was like I was co-composing with Jerry. It was like I have these kind of I'd find myself almost having conversations, like, what do you think of this, Jerry? I mean, it really, and to me, to do that with an idol that I so wish we could hear more music from him. I was really trying my best to do as good a job as possible to try to channel that. So I think even just that experience almost made my music from that point on even sound more like kind of a Jerry, in that vibe, all the way up through The Mummy, which clearly, I mean, harmonically and the counterpoint and everything is so influenced by him.
Absolutely. I mean, there's actually one statement by a composer, and I don't quite remember who said it, but if you're not influenced by Jerry Goldsmith, you're not a good composer, or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, if you're doing film music, and I mean, it's funny, you would think that they would just be an automatic, but it isn't. I do talk to, um, you know, up and coming young composers and students that are in the programs and things, and I am sometimes surprised. I mean, over time, of course, as things go, you know, he becomes less and less studied. That's why I feel it's really important for me and other composers that are my generation to keep it going. It's like Miklos Rosa or Dimitri Tomkin or
Yeah.
anything like that. I'm heavily influenced by them, but I know a lot of people my age aren't. It's just too early, and I'm it, his the thing about Jerry is his influence is so strong, like John Williams,
Yeah.
and that the impact is felt even if they don't even know Jerry Goldsmith or have a Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack, they are influenced by Jerry because, I mean, I still think of myself as, I just kind of got in this business. Everyone feels they're still young in a way, like, I'm still trying to make it, and the weird thing is now when I meet students and they say, I completely I'm a composer because I listened to your music and you're the first soundtrack I ever bought, and they're going to school and their entire kind of music education was post my scores, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what? And then I say something like, well, Jerry Goldsmith, usually it's like, yes, but if they don't, the thing they don't even realize is by listening then to my music, which was influenced by Jerry, they're still being influenced by Jerry,
Yeah,
And I
sure.
think that's a timeless,
Yeah.
Jerry's so timeless that's going to be
It's
through the 80s,
yeah. I
even
mean,
if they don't know it.
it's always, I mean, the younger generation. It's
Yeah.
always, and well, there are so many people out there that have basically no clue who Jerry was, or who
I know.
Max Steiner was, or
Yes.
Alfred Newman. And to me, I mean, I grew up with this stuff, and I'm such a big film buff and nerd that for me it's a given to know the names basically. And
No.
but many
Yeah,
but
exactly. I mean, yeah, and I remember talking to some students, or no, it wasn't students. They were just younger fans. I was out in Europe and I was doing a Q&A, and I remember saying something, and this is what surprised me. Is we were talking about influences, and um, the thing that occurred to me was, well, we all have influences certainly, and I was in France actually. I was in Paris speaking, and I said, well, The Mummy, it has strains, and I mentioned Jerry Goldsmith in terms of the what I wanted to go for, something classic, and also Maurice Jarre, because of course he did Lawrence of Arabia, and I wanted the
yeah,
feel of lush, you know, sandscapes of the desert and even though Lawrence of Arabia was I mean it has that vibe, and since this movie had pyramids and it had Egypt, it was a close cousin of it, and so of course Lawrence of Arabia is a huge, and Maurice Jarre is a huge influence. But I do remember in France even getting a who's Maurice Jarre.
yeah.
I don't think that was the majority, but I did get someone that asked that at one point, and I'm just thinking, I'm in France. This is not what, but still, these
Yeah,
younger.
sure.
You're talking about 14, 15-year-old film music fan. They haven't been exposed to everything yet.
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, film music and film have such a vast history, and it's so versatile. Of course, you can't know everybody. That's not the point. But
No,
I
no, it's not.
think when you're trying to study music, study movie, I think you should have a substantial knowledge of the history.
Oh,
Uh,
it helps. It
yeah,
just from a perspective of one, I think it's just a good thing. It'll enrich your life. But just from a strategic point of view of trying to make yourself as good as possible, The more you know how these things worked and the history of it, the more you're able to understand why things sound the way they do, and it opens your mind to new possibilities. Just like I think it's important, and I say this to there's people that I meet that know every film composer all the way back to the original, films that were Prokofiev and the kind of the ones that were mixed with classical. You know it all along, and then we start talking about other genres of music, and they're clueless to it. And I think to me, the influences of watching the jazz and paying attention to the origins of hip hop and how it's evolved since the 70s, even the roots of that and how that connected to breakbeats and James Brown, and how rock connects with electronic music and the British New Wave and then the French New Wave, and then you have just on indie music and indie music that's a throwback to this, and I mean, connecting all the dots from Steely Dan to Arcade Fire all the way up to modern acts that are like M83 and
Yeah.
how that connects to Porter Robinson, and how Porter Robinson connects to Madeon, and how that and I mean, all of those things isn't just like a knowledge base so you can go on musical Jeopardy and be able to, or do musical Trivial Pursuit and do really well. It's that these things we can all learn from everyone. I think Vangelis was someone that when he did the early scores like Blade Runner and Chariots of Fire and the Mutiny on the Bounty and the Bounty, excuse me, all those they just completely turned everything on its head. It's like it was all electronic, Tangerine Dream, all these things. John Carpenter and Alan Howarth. When then Maurice Jarre was listening to that stuff, and he does Dreamscape, and he's thinking, oh, you know what? I'm going to try to use some of these interesting sounds that Vangelis is using on these keyboards. And even they, I think it's really important to pay attention to all these things. One of my favorite pieces I've done is this piece called Heat from Far Cry, and it's so influenced by Vangelis and Sigur Rós and these kind of different things from different genres. And I think it's important, what I tell kind of up and coming people that are studying it or wanting to get into film music, is make sure that you listen to all sorts of different kinds of music, because all of that just will enrich your writing.
Absolutely.
Your style.
Very true. Very true. Now we spend quite a lot on history and all that stuff, but I actually would like to get back to Sylvester Stallone, because we talked about Rambo at length, but a couple of years later you did The Expendables, which he also directed, and I consider the Expendables franchise one of your most important movie score series. But there wasn't much time on the first Expendables, if I am not mistaken. I think you had about 4 weeks. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was about that. It was wild. Yeah, it was crazy. I don't remember exactly how long, but it was fast.
When you're under such a tight schedule, how long do you actually have to work each day? I mean, it's like you can't just, say, punch out after 8 hours. I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had many experiences going, for quite a long time, averaging 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. I would say I probably averaged nearly that for about 6 straight months earlier this year, or starting at the end of last year, and all the way from Triple X to The Mummy, I probably was averaging that. Certainly, that's kind of if I start creeping up past that into 21 hours a day, after about 5 days, it starts to get impossible. I'll have to kind of reset. So I've done this long enough to actually know about where my limit is, because I have a clock that's connected to my system. So when I'm writing, the clock's running, and it's kind of like a health monitor. Every week I see what my average work day was in terms of actually working. And I do recall on the Expendables it was around 20. And it gets hard on day number, let's say you're on 4 weeks, you start to get up into the teens, 14, 15, 16, 17 days in a row like that. It is really hard on your system, your body,
Well, I mean,
your mind.
I personally admire you for that. I mean, if I were in a situation of this, magnitude, I probably couldn't do 20 hours a day. I mean that's wow.
Yeah, it's out there. It's kind of by necessity. If I try to do anything near that when I don't have a deadline,
Yeah.
I can't actually do it, even if someone was paying me a lot. I wouldn't be able to do it. It's the deadline, the musical deadline. For some reason, that's what does it. That's what gets me to get there. Without it, I think it's a goal. I want to accomplish it. I remember doing the Expendables. I wanted to give it something really special, and that movie just took a lot of time in terms of writing the notes themselves. There was so much action in that film.
Yes.
That doing, there were pieces that ran into each other that were essentially 23-minute action pieces, where they all would run together, and you have to make it interesting, and you don't want it to be a barrage, and you have to work it out. So sometimes I would write a piece that was, 7 minutes of crazy action, and I think, this is awesome. I really love this, and then I would put it in context, and I would throw it out because it would be too constant or something, and I'm a great believer in dynamics in action music. It needs to ebb and flow. You can't just hammer away. It's the worst thing you can do in action music is just hammer, hammer, hammer. Because you just can't, you don't process it. There's no dynamics. And so I was doing things like, on that movie, I mean, Sly completely trusted me. We knew what was going on in that movie, and we watched the movie together, and I played him the initial theme, I think, on the piano, maybe, and he's like, "I'll see you at the dub stage." Like, he's like, "I know." He's like, "I trust you. I could give notes." He's like, "I could give you notes. I know I could. We're gonna disagree. There's no way we're gonna agree on everything, but on the whole." On balance, probably my notes aren't going to really, probably your decision's right half the time, my decision's half right the time. We'll call it a wash. With this amount of time and this Herculean of an effort, you just go do your thing, and I'll see you then. And literally, and I remember doing that, and it was so crazy because I'm thinking, wow, this is I now really need to make this good. And sure enough, it's even on film. I think it's in the DVD extras or something, where it literally, a film crew showed, like, as we went in to go watch the playback of the movie, the final playback of the movie, that's when he was walking in to hear the score. And he talks about it. He's like, well, he's kind of joking around with me. If you didn't nail this, you ruined my movie or something. It's going to be your fault, But
Crazy.
but the film, and in fact, I think the cameras were rolling when the lights went on at the end of the movie, and I was sitting right next to him, and it was just a great moment. It was I think it was my most nerve-wracking playbacks ever, though. Knowing that
I bet.
These weren't mock-ups. This was the final recorded orchestra in the mix where they've mixed in the sound effects and everything, and he could make notes and all that, and it just was it was a great feeling to know that someone actually had that much trust, because it was all in his hands. But there's nothing either of us could. It was a freight train, and it was tough though. After that, I definitely needed a nap.
I bet. What was the situation like on the sequels, on Expendables 2 and 3? Was there also such a major deadline, or did you have more leeway?
It was sometimes there was. I remember on the third one, there were some deadline issues where I had to definitely work crazy hours. but you know, the cool thing is that on those we kind of had an established language. He would say, hey, you know that one theme, the one that goes, and he wouldn't ever really name the themes. He'd always sing them to me, which was always cool. You know, he would, you know, the one that goes, bun, bun, da da dun dun da da dun, you know, that. Or,
Yeah.
he would sing them to me, and then I go, and we kind of spotted the movie that way. He had an idea. By then, he's so good with music. Like, he really understands, you know, how music should work in a film. And so we would spot it by not putting in other people's music from all sorts of different movies. We just kind of left those movies blank and said, oh, you know, you should kind of go to this theme here, this theme here. Oh, we need a new theme for this guy here. Okay, yeah, maybe, you know, what about like kind of a, you know, one of those mystery kind of things that you do, you know, like this, you know, and he just would kind of reference it in a way that was really effective in the sense that for me it was fun because here I am working on a series where I'm able to expand on themes that I've already written, much in the way Now You See Me was. It's like really fun when you did the first movie in the series because you can then utilize and then certainly to have 3 movies to do it in was a blast.
Right. Do you sometimes find it difficult to convince the director to go for a fully orchestral approach or a thematic approach to maybe say, okay, we got 4 characters, each needs to have their own theme? How do you communicate that?
Yeah, it depends. You know, it's something that I do believe in. I'm a thematic writer. That's just how I'm wired. But there are times when you don't want that. The movies I did with William Friedkin, for instance, they're textural. They're, you know, Bug is practically atonal with one lullaby theme that's completely counter to the rest of the score. The Hunted is much more of like it's a contemporary classical kind of approach where it's a modern score more in the world of Grigliano and John Adams and that kind of thing. And so, but they're not particularly thematic, and by design, I think that works in those sense. But even a score like Break is quite thematic, and probably one of my most thematic scores, even though it's probably the most, you know, kind of modern in terms of or postmodern, I guess. But yeah, you know, the directors that I kind of vibe with and that we tend to like each other are ones that are like-minded. We're talking about Power Rangers before I did that score. I remember Dean and I were talking about, right away we were talking about themes, and well, there's 5 characters, main characters. There's 5 Power Rangers, and there's also 2 villains, and then there's a kind of a leader of all this. There's a 6th character, and then there's the comedic character, the 7. Oh boy, we're getting a lot of themes. So what we did is we combined the Power Rangers into one unit, which they're really supposed to be anyway, because they don't become Power Rangers until they learn to work together and all that. So sometimes it's streamlining and creating a team theme. Expendables was the same way. You really needed to combine, and then the way you do the themes, you have a main theme for all of them, but then you kind of you have moments where you have sub themes that are for each character's moments, and you know, in a matter of convincing, yeah, I think there are times also where I've worked on films where there's a series, and I'm always for continuity, so I always try to, you know, say if you're going to have a series of films, you really do want someone's theme to continue on.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of when you see a movie and then the character comes up in the next movie and all of a sudden everything's different again. And at a certain point, you really do want to establish something that you can hold on to. I mean, that's the lesson of Star Wars, you know. That's,
yeah.
You know, but sometimes that falls on deaf ears. Sometimes it doesn't. I just do my best.
Yeah. But I think it can be kind of, stifling and difficult to communicate all that, and especially when it comes to finding the right, approach for a movie. I mean, sometimes in terms of, the Fast and the Furious, they market a score album and a song album, so basically you have to figure out where do you need songs and where do you need score, and yeah, I can imagine it's pretty difficult.
Yeah, and on the Fast and Furious movies, for instance, those actually, as the movies have gone on, there's so much score. Like over time, there's always songs that are great. They're great place tunes, and they're also written for the movies.
Yeah.
But they've integrated them. I mean, I was, for instance, of course, in Furious 7 with "See You Again," the song. That was such an emotional, important song in the film, but it was part of the score. And I mean, you can hear how Brian and Mia's themes developed even from the fourth film, when all the way to number 7, and it's a part of that theme, and it's a part of the song, and it's like the way it connects with the song. All these things, are really great, and I think that a big part of that is because the music department's really great there at Universal, and they understand that the score is supposed to connect with the tunes, and that is actually kind of rare. I would say that when you're dealing with something like that is rare. I think that, and also the fact that Justin Lin is the director of 4, 5, 6. He really wanted to establish, kind of set the Fast and Furious movies as the kind of, I don't know how you term it, but kind of a more cinematic structure where characters and there's emotion and it's about family, and so you needed themes, and in a way, I thematically scored those films actually very traditionally, like so it wasn't just a series of, ooh, what's this cool beat? And all the way through, F. Gary Gray directing it, one of the first things he said on that movie was like, we don't need to try hard to make this movie like cool. That is not the point. So we don't need to always be looking for, how can we make this music hip? And it's such a true thing. Like that is such a secondary, the capsule in which the music is delivered, the kind of the most obvious thing, which is like what instrumentation's used, is not as important as what are the notes written, and that was really cool that they've had directors that feel that way.
Right.
James Wan, all the way along.
Yeah, it's so helpful. It's so helpful when you have a director or a producer that really knows or is comfortable with
Yes.
the use of music. I mean, sometimes I perceive that they believe the safest bet is just to go for percussive material, and just to kind of let's say ignore the thematic approach.
Oh gosh, such a disaster. I know, and I do see that, and I've seen films from with composers that I absolutely adore, that I don't know what's happened, but they probably stripped out the orchestra or the musical nature, and you hear just like chick 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 chick, going along, and it's just so terrible, and I'm just thinking, you can, action music still needs to have thematic content and be just interesting to the ear. It needs to move. It can't just be percussion. Honestly, is like just straight up percussion. The whole, after a while, is like the kind of the enemy of creating narrative structure in an action scene. It just, if you just have, I mean, look how great the music is from, if you look even back in the day, like you watch Dr. No, or any of that music that kind of, the James Bond, like those, that's not just rhythmic, it's melodic, or Star Wars, a whole, you watch the entire end battle to the original Star Wars. It's musically saying something. If you slather just percussion loops over those scenes, I mean, you wouldn't feel anything.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah.
I love melodic writing to action. Not saying that percussion doesn't have a place. I love percussion. I'm a percussionist, but you that it cannot live on that alone.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Well, I think maybe some people are just less receptive to emotion, and they might not, or they might not know what they're missing. I mean, they say, "Well,
Well,
that's."
I'll tell you what happens.
Yeah.
Honestly, is what happens is you get a bunch of people in a room at the studio or something, and this is the worst case scenario, and you listen to you're watching the movie with the playback in for sound, so everyone's just there to basically analyze the sound, which includes the music, and so instead of watching the movie just to watch it like an audience member, they're using their brains to listen. You're not supposed to use your brain to listen to this stuff. You're supposed to take it in just holistically and kind of, you're just supposed to let the movie wash over you. What did you feel? Oh, cool, or whatever. But since they're listening analytically, sometimes anything that they notice that is actually musical, oh no, we can't have that. I noticed that there's music there. I hear that over and over and over again. When it's the worst case scenario, and what they do is they go into the stems on the mixing board and they just mute all the orchestra and leave the percussion. And I have a feeling, since that's happened to me numerous times, I have a feeling it happens to a lot of other composers, which then causes this lifeless, soulless, bunch of 16th notes on percussion rattling through a long scene, making it complete shit, And so it's too bad, but I can understand this. I know the psychology of what's going on there. Of course, if you're analyzing with your brain instead of listening with your ears and your heart, and taking it in, you are and you feel like the need to say something in a room full of people. That's the thing that you're going to say most likely, and so it's a danger to the system. We try to guard against it as much as possible, so we preserve life and contour and melody and magic that preserves in the score. And the only thing I can do is kind of say, hey, why don't you just go back and watch that last battle sequence of Star Wars and then get back to me and tell me, maybe just let's take a breath here and see.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always work.
Times have changed drastically.
Well, it's because you can so easily now mute different parts of the recording and leave the certain elements and whatnot. And back in the day, the limits of technology meant you committed to a sound of the score. Yeah. And once you committed and you couldn't kind of really change it except maybe change entire pieces, swap them out for other ones, I think people actually were able to listen to playbacks without being so overly analytical and just kind of would take it in and trust the experts in their fields to have done their job, which includes the cinematographer, the actors, and the composer.
Well said. Yeah, absolutely right. In terms of songwriting, we previously just breezed over The Drift and Fall Again, which was in the Kevin Costner film Criminal, right? And could you tell me about the origins of the Madsonik project?
Oh, right. So the origins of the Madsonik project came just slightly before then, which was on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
By the way, I should have mentioned that as one of the most fun projects I've had writing. But the idea was, why don't we need a song. It's almost like in how integral Eye of the Tiger is to Rocky III. We needed something that really, really branded Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And the idea was, can we make a song, it's like a pop song, whatever stripe, that includes the theme that I wrote from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the melody. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. So they said, hey, we know that you are working on this project. It's kind of an electronic project. It's electronic music and kind of trap music and had some hip-hop influences and everything. And I didn't have a name for the project yet. I was just working on some stuff, and the people at Paramount heard this. And they're like, this is really cool. You know, this is actually, I didn't know that you did this for real, like seriously, not just kind of as a hobby, you know. And it's like, no, yeah, no, absolutely. So then I had this idea of doing something that was kind of a crossover anthemic hip-hop song that kind of had a rock chorus that about, you know, turtles. And so I got Wiz Khalifa together and Juicy J and Kill the Noise and Ty Dolla $ign. Well, so we all, and Moxie Rea did the vocals. Well, we all collaborated on this song that I'd written with Kill the Noise based on the theme of the movie. And as an artist, it was like, this is kind of connected to the score, but as producing the song, it wasn't a Brian Tyler thing, because it's not score. And so Wiz Khalifa was like, you can't use your name on this. It needs to be a separate thing. When now you go and write songs, it needs to be almost like a band or an artist project or whatever, and he came up with the name Madsonik. So then, as I started doing these other projects, I started doing tunes, and I was remixing. I remixed Black Beatles, which ended up being a big #1 hit. And I did in Shell Shock, the song that I did as Madsonik, it went gold. It was like a gold record, and all of a sudden there was I'm like, whoa, this stuff is actually doing something. And so then I got asked to go on tour as Madsonik, and I did a lot of touring and going on the road, and I would play music festivals and my tour was Kill the Noise and Ricky-san and Boombox Cartel, and all of a sudden it became this other thing, all the while I was scoring films. So by the time Drift and Fall came along, I wanted to do a song for that one as well, and it just turns out that ended up being a Madsonik song that might even be more popular. It's certainly one of my two popular songs is Madsonik, that and Shell Shock. And then a remix was done by Kill the Noise, and that ended up being a EDM hit, and it's just kind of crazy, you know, but I love it because it's a side project, but it's a real project where I get to explore music that isn't necessarily tied to film, and it kind of, I'm able to express a different side of myself, and
Right.
and so it's been a really fun project, and I just played a few nights ago here in LA as a Madsonik thing. And it's fun because I get to film music people come to those shows and they get exposed to a certain kind of music. And then I conducted at Disney Hall not too long ago, conducting Thor, and a bunch of Madsonik kind of kids came to Disney Hall and saw, you know, me conducting the Philharmonic, and they'd never been to an orchestral concert. And then they got, in their lives, first time. And then they came up to me and they got interested in film music because they knew I did that too. And all of a sudden they're buying Jerry Goldsmith soundtracks. You know, it's been so interesting in many unexpected ways.
Cool. Are there any plans to release maybe a full Madsonik album as a concept album or any?
Yes, it is. It's funny. 2 words you just said were true. Concept album is being made right now. In fact,
Good.
let me look at the time right now. I have in fact, I have a meeting very shortly about that album. They're coming over to the studio. We're working right now. We're shooting I'll say this. It's modern electronic trap kind of feels music. It's a blend of anything you could say from, you know, M83 to Skrillex to whatever. It's its own thing, but we're doing it as a concept album. It's basically like science fiction is the theme.
Great.
And so it's post-apocalyptic science fiction. And so we're shooting a video right now and shooting it all in the desert, kind of Tatooine style, you know.
Right. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So that's going on right now. And in fact, I'm meeting on that and shortly. Otherwise, I mean, I'll actually have to go in a few minutes because of it. So.
Okay. Maybe we have time for one last question before you have to leave.
Sure.
You've done a
I
concert.
didn't realize time had passed. I'm just having a good time talking to you.
Yeah, great. Brian, you've done a concert in the UK. Given the latest trend of concerts or in concert tours, I mean, Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard is coming up as well. Is there any chance of you doing a concert tour, or maybe conducting more concerts in the US, maybe Europe, Germany, Austria, or something like that?
100%. This is something that I am currently working on the dates and figuring out specifics, but it's in the works. And it's one of my most impassioned projects is taking film music out into the world and performing it live.
Good.
The experience I've had recently of doing some concerts is, there are one-off concerts here and there that have been great, but to do an actual tour and really take it out there, really thinking of something that hopefully is really special that people will enjoy. But as a film music fan, I would have loved growing up going to go see Alan Silvestri and go see James Horner.
Yeah.
When he was around, and see some Jerry Gold. And there were concerts here and there. Certainly John Williams was the first that he does them, and I'm seeing him in 2 weeks. And he's going to be great at the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah.
But really for me it was like there's nothing wrong with it. It was basically like if you were in rock music and the only concert you could go to was the Beatles. It's amazing. But think of how many bands out there you'd want to see, and so to me, if film composers got out there more and did it, and I think it's going to become a thing.
I sure hope so. I mean, it's such a tremendous experience,
Yes, and we almost need, and also it's great. There's the emergence of these really big film music festivals as well. It's almost like film score Coachella vibe, where you getting a great lineup, and then but I'm working on individual concerts coming up, make it really, really special, hopefully, for everyone.
Yeah, I couldn't make it to the UK appointment to the concert, but I hopefully I will be able to attend one of your concerts in the future.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, and we're gonna. I mean, certainly Germany is on the list too. So.
Oh, that's. Now you've really made my day.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. I mean, so much. My conducting. It's funny. A few hero conductors looking up, but I grew up watching Berlin Philharmonic, so Herbert von Karajan and all that. Like I have video of that. That's kind of what I looked at for stylistically, that and Leonard Bernstein, and so. So I had kind of a range of styles that I would, very different, but a range of styles, and so for me it would be like it would be just amazing to come and do it there, no doubt.
Great. Looking forward to it, and it would be great to meet up when you get into Germany.
Yes. No question.
What was I gonna say now? In terms of a film music festival, I'm actually gonna be at the Soundtrack Cologne in Germany, which I think you've heard of it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Great.
That's great.
It's the 14th edition now, coming up, starting in 2 days.
Yeah.
And you've never been there, right?
I haven't. No, I kind of see what goes down every year, and I mean it's going to be real cool. I mean, yeah, it is tomorrow, isn't it? Tomorrow's
Yes, it is tomorrow. Yes. Yeah.
Because I believe the the pop festival just happened there last. I think it just ended Sunday, in Cologne, and I'm one of my favorite groups, Moderat.
Yeah, yeah.
And which I happened to see. I'm glad I got to see Moderat when they were in L.A. last time, because they're going to go their separate ways and become Mode Selector and Apparat again and not be Moderat. And so Moderat is finishing and ending, and that's crushing to me because I love them.
But there's a lot going on, right now. I mean, the but Hollywood in Vienna also coming up in September, which
Yep.
has become also pretty huge actually. And so, to me as a fan and the journalist, it's kind of makes me really happy to see that
Oh yeah,
film
yeah,
music
no,
is getting really.
totally.
Yeah.
It is really, yeah. And so I think there's a Danny Elfman tribute thing going on in that one.
It's Danny Elfman showing up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's and I know and love Danny. He's someone that I was lucky enough to work with, but I was a huge fan of since I was a kid.
Sure, I mean, I love Danny's music. I mean, ever since I watched Batman as a kid,
Yeah.
I mean, it totally got me hooked. And so from my point of view, it's so great to see that it's getting more and more accepted in public, and that people are talking about it openly, and to see it's kind of a step out of the niche, even though I hate that word.
No, it's true, and he's someone that came at it from a different angle, coming from Oingo Boingo, but yeah, the first I heard him was Pee-wee's Big Adventure,
Yeah, sure.
and then to hear the stark contrast, they're stylistically connected, but to Batman, those opening notes of Batman are just some of the, just the minor run up to the flat six, just like whoa, it just had this incredible power. And
Yeah,
so it was really fun being able to work with him on Avengers. It was
totally.
awesome.
I mean, I could watch the opening credits a million times over and over again. I mean, yeah, I love it. Yeah, the Avengers. Okay, we completely skipped that one basically, but maybe next time when we talk again.
Oh yeah, that was. I mean, it's crazily like hard work up to the very last on that movie, but yeah, I mean, capping it off with being able to just not very very long time being able to work with Danny just for a little while was cool. I mean, that's one for the books. That's a bucket list.
That's one for the books. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I think that's the longest I've worked on him, or the closest I've scored a piece to before release of a movie. I did a piece that was within 2 weeks of the movie coming out. It was like, that was non-stop, but certainly fun working with him too.
Stressful times.
Yeah, no doubt. Always.
Always. Do you ever go on vacation?
Every once in a while I do. Every once in a while. It's pretty rare. But when I find a slot, I don't plan for the vacation. I just say, tomorrow I'm getting on a plane and we're getting out of town for a little bit. It's been a few years though.
Do you mostly work 7 days a week, or does it depend on the project?
Oh, unless I'm vacationing, it's always 7 days a week. Always. I don't remember a day. I even if it's a slow moment on a project, I will get in there and I will work on a song for maybe Madsonik, or a song just that I'm writing out. Sometimes I like writing symphonic music that has nothing to do with the film, and it's just I hand write it down on paper and I put it in a drawer or whatever. I have to be able to be around a piano or a guitar or drum every day. Even when I'm on vacation, I have instruments around me. I can't. It's always there.
Yeah, the workaholic.
Yeah, I guess it's like kind of the fact that my hobby is my job, my passion is my job, career. It's kind of weird that blurs the line, where I almost don't consider it work sometimes. The work comes when it's those crazy long deadline hour days. Then it's really, that's different. But just me sitting down at the piano is something that I would do just Even if I would do that after I got home from my office job if I wasn't a composer. What would I do? I'd come home, I'd drive home from work, and I would sit down at the piano and play for the rest of the night. So kind of lucky in that way.
It's great. Okay, and just make sure that you put up nice concerts for all the fans, and be
Absolutely.
be sure to include the turtles.
Oh, no question. That the overture from Ninja Turtles is.
Yeah.
I will say already ahead of time. That's in there.
Sure. And also, of course, the Mummy. We've covered so much ground of your career now, but we haven't really spoken about the Mummy.
I know.
Yeah, it's totally. That's one of your best efforts. I mean, that's totally top 10 Brian Tyler, if not top 5 Brian Tyler material.
I sometimes need distance to be able to tell, but I really feel strongly about that walking away, and when I go back and listen to it, and it got the parent stamp of approval review where they felt that was probably my best. It was like, whoa, parents coming out of the woodwork listening to that. They just because they finally got the actual physical CD. I sent it over to them because they wanted that, and so sweet to see my mom write me a text and say, we've been listening to that, and we really think that's the one.
It is really a great score, and also a really good album. And what's like 74, 75 minutes of music. I mean, that's as usual. I mean, you write great themes. Your orchestration is great, and you really have a good, nice rhythmic, way of writing. And I think you really continue on the tradition of, let's say, full orchestral scores, and you also, you're really great at blending the electronics in as well. So basically, I think you cover all the you basically got what's required to write really great music here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, man.
Sure thing.
Great. Well, we'll have to continue this. I'm jumping in here I've got now 2 minutes to go to my meeting.
Oh, Christ.
But I would love to talk again, so we should do that. It's been really, really cool.
It was a great interview. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. And
for sure.
We've spoken for almost 90 minutes now, and that's...
Wow, unbelievable. I did not know that. Wow. Okay,
90 minutes, that's a record for me too. It's the longest interview I've ever conducted so far.
Oh, jeez. Wow. Okay. Well, that's good. That could be that could go either way. But I certainly enjoyed talking, and would love to do it again.
And thank you so much for your time. It is highly appreciated. Thank you, Brian.
Back at you, Michael. All right.
Bye.
Bye.